The orange citation envelope tucked under my windshield wiper was the 15th one I had received in 3 months, and I knew before opening it that Brenda Patterson, president of the Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association in Scottsdale, Arizona, had found yet another reason to empty my wallet. I pulled the paper out and read the violation. Unsightly leaf pile exceeding permitted dimensions. Fine, $500. I stood there in my driveway, staring at the carefully raked pile of autumn leaves that sat exactly 3 feet from the curb, as specified in the HOA guidelines I had memorized by now. My name is Frank Fitzgerald, and I had moved to Meadowbrook Estates 8 months ago after accepting a job as an electrical engineer at a semiconductor company. The subdivision looked perfect in the listing photos, with its manicured lawns, uniform beige stucco houses, and promises of a tight-knit community. What the real estate agent failed to mention was that Brenda Patterson ruled this neighborhood like a medieval tyrant, wielding the HOA bylaws like a weapon against anyone who dared to exist within her domain. I walked inside my house and tossed the citation onto the kitchen counter, where it joined a growing collection of similar notices. The first fine had been for leaving my trash cans visible from the street 15 minutes past the 7 a.m. cutoff time. The second was for a garden gnome that violated the no lawn ornaments clause. The third was for parking my work van in my own driveway instead of the garage. The list went on and on, each violation more absurd than the last. My neighbor, an elderly man named George, had warned me about Brenda during my first week. "She is out for blood," he had said while trimming his hedges to the exact 18-inch height mandated by the HOA. Last year, she fined the Johnsons so much they had to sell their house. All because their rose bushes were the wrong shade of pink. I had laughed it off at the time, thinking George was exaggerating. Now, I understood he had been understating the problem. The next morning, I woke up to find Brenda herself standing on my front lawn, taking photographs of the leaf pile with a professional camera. She was a woman in her late 40s, with a blonde bob that looked like it required daily maintenance and designer athleisure, where that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. She wore oversized sunglasses even though the sun had barely risen. I opened my front door and stepped outside. "Can I help you, Brenda?" She did not even look up from her camera. "Just documenting violations for the monthly HOA meeting. This leaf pile has been here for 3 days now." "The guidelines say I have up to 5 days to have leaves collected," I replied, keeping my voice level. I scheduled the city pickup for Thursday. The guidelines also state that leaf piles must be neat and contained. This one is clearly spreading onto the sidewalk. She pointed at a single leaf that had blown about 2 inches past the edge of the pile. I took a deep breath. "Brenda, that is one leaf. The wind probably blew it there 5 minutes ago. Rules are rules, Frank. If we let one person slide, the entire neighborhood falls into chaos." She lowered her camera and finally looked at me. "You have until 5 p.m. today to remove the entire pile, or the fine increases to $750. The fine notice I received yesterday said $500. That was yesterday's rate. Continued violations incur escalating penalties." She smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made my blood pressure spike. "It is all in Section 12, subsection 4 of the HOA bylaws." After she left, I spent 2 hours reading through the entire HOA covenant, all 87 pages of it. She was technically correct, though the language was buried so deep in legal jargon that most people would never find it. I realized then that Brenda had not just memorized these rules. She had probably helped write them specifically to create loopholes for her enforcement regime. I called the city waste management and begged them to come early. They said Thursday was the earliest possible date. I considered bagging all the leaves myself, but the HOA guidelines specifically prohibited storing bagged lawn waste in visible locations, and my garage was already full. I was trapped in a perfect catch-22 situation, which I suspected was exactly what Brenda had intended. That evening, I attended the monthly HOA meeting held in the community clubhouse. About 30 residents showed up, most of them looking as exhausted and frustrated as I felt. Brenda stood at the front of the room behind a podium, flanked by the other board members. Her best friend Susan, her cousin Margaret, and her former college roommate Patricia. The entire board was composed of Brenda's personal allies, which explained how she had maintained power for 6 consecutive years. "First order of business," Brenda announced, looking directly at me. "We have collected over $15,000 in fines this quarter, which will go toward our planned fountain renovation in the front entrance." A man in the back raised his hand. "Brenda, my family contributed $3,000 of those fines. We are barely making our mortgage payments. Can we discuss some kind of payment plan or appeals process?" "The bylaws are clear, Daniel. Ignorance of the rules is not an excuse. Everyone signed the covenant when they purchased their homes." Brenda shuffled some papers. "Now, regarding the fountain renovation, I have selected a contractor who quoted us at $48,000. $48,000. Another resident gasped. "For a fountain?" "It is an investment in our property values," Brenda said smoothly. "The current fountain is an eyesore. This new design features Italian marble and LED lighting." I stood up. "I would like to propose that we use the fine money for something more practical. The street lights near the retention pond have been out for months, and the playground equipment needs repairs." Brenda's expression hardened. "Are you questioning the board's decision-making authority?" "I am questioning how this board spends our money, yes. According to the bylaws, major expenditures over $10,000 require a general vote from all homeowners." The room fell silent. Brenda's face flushed red. "The fountain renovation falls under aesthetic improvements, which Section 18 grants the board unilateral authority to approve. Section 18 was amended in 2019, I said, pulling out my phone where I had bookmarked the relevant page. "The amendment added a clause requiring homeowner approval for aesthetic improvements exceeding $15,000. Brenda snatched the phone from my hand. "This meeting is not open to legal debates from armchair lawyers. Your comments are noted and dismissed." She handed my phone back. "Now, moving on to new violations." She projected a slideshow onto the screen behind her. The first image was my leaf pile. The second was my neighbor George's mailbox, which was apparently 3 inches too tall. The third was a photo of a child's bicycle left on someone's lawn. "These violations represent the deteriorating standards of our community," Brenda declared. "We must remain vigilant, or Meadowbrook Estates will become just another run-down suburb." After the meeting, several residents approached me in the parking lot. A younger woman named Jennifer said, "Thank you for standing up to her. No one else has the guts." "She is destroying this neighborhood," George added. "My wife and I have lived here for 20 years. It used to be friendly. Now, everyone is terrified to even plant flowers without checking with Brenda first." An idea began forming in my mind, but I kept it to myself for now. I needed more information about how Brenda operated and where she might be vulnerable. Over the next week, I did some digging. I requested financial records from the HOA, which they were legally required to provide to homeowners. What I discovered was disturbing. The fountain contractor Brenda had selected was owned by her brother-in-law. The landscaping company that held the exclusive contract for all neighborhood common areas was registered to Brenda's husband. The property management company that handled HOA administrative tasks charged us 3 times the market rate and was co-owned by Brenda herself. I made copies of everything and started building a case. But I knew I needed leverage, something that would force the other homeowners to finally take action against Brenda's corruption. The breakthrough came when I noticed the street cleaning schedule. Every Tuesday morning at 6 a.m., a city-contracted street sweeper drove through Meadowbrook Estates, cleaning the gutters and roads. The route was programmed into the vehicle's GPS system, and the driver, a guy named Mike who I had chatted with a few times, mentioned that the machine practically drove itself along the preset path. I also knew that Brenda took her morning power walk every Tuesday at 5:30 a.m. sharp, a routine she never deviated from. She would walk the entire perimeter of the neighborhood, looking for violations to photograph. The retention pond sat at the southern edge of the subdivision, an engineered water feature that collected runoff and provided habitat for local birds. It was about 8 feet deep at the center, and surrounded by a decorative border of rocks and desert plants. The street that circled the pond had a slight slope leading down toward the water. My plan was risky and probably illegal, but after months of Brenda's tyranny and discovering the extent of her financial corruption, I felt justified. I was not going to physically hurt anyone. I just wanted to create enough chaos to expose what she had been doing. Tuesday morning arrived cold and clear. I woke at 4:30 a.m. and dressed in dark clothes. I grabbed my toolkit and headed out to the street near the retention pond. The street sweeper's route was predictable. It came down Maple Drive, turned onto Oak Street, circled the pond, and then exited through the main gate. I had spent the previous evening studying traffic control equipment. The street sweeper's guidance system relied on sensors that detected road markings and temporary diversion signs. City workers used these signs all the time to route the sweeper around construction or obstacles. I placed 3 official-looking traffic cones at the intersection where the sweeper normally turned away from the pond. Then, I positioned a detour sign that directed traffic to continue straight, which led down the sloped section of road. The critical part was making sure the sign matched the specifications that the sweeper's computer would recognize as legitimate city signage. I had copied the exact reflective tape pattern and color scheme from my observations of real city equipment. At 5:15 a.m., I hid behind a large boulder near the pond and waited. The temperature was hovering around 50 degrees, typical for Scottsdale in November. I could see my breath in the air. Right on schedule, Brenda appeared at 5:30, speed walking along the sidewalk with her phone held up, ready to capture any violations. She was wearing pink athletic gear and had earbuds in, probably listening to a podcast about how to be an even more efficient dictator. At 5:55 a.m., I heard the familiar rumble of the street sweeper approaching. Mike, the driver, was visible through the windshield, looking half asleep as the machine did most of the work. The vehicle followed the road markings, its brushes spinning and water spraying. It approached my intersection and detected the detour sign. The sweeper's computer processed the information and adjusted course, continuing straight instead of turning. Mike did not even seem to notice. He was checking his phone. The sweeper picked up speed slightly going down the slope. Brenda had stopped to take a photo of someone's trash can and did not see or hear it coming up behind her. What happened next occurred in slow motion. Mike finally looked up and saw where the street sweeper was headed. He grabbed the controls and tried to override the automated system, but the vehicle's momentum on the slope was too much. The sweeper veered right to avoid Brenda, who jumped aside and screamed. The heavy machine crashed through the decorative border and plunged into the retention pond with a massive splash. Water erupted in all directions, soaking Brenda completely. The street sweeper came to rest partially submerged, its brushes still spinning uselessly as water poured into the cab. Mike scrambled out through the driver's side window, soaking wet but apparently uninjured. He waded through the chest-deep water toward the edge, cursing loudly. I stayed hidden, watching the scene unfold. Within minutes, other residents emerged from their homes, drawn by the commotion. Someone called 911. Fire trucks and police cars arrived, their sirens echoing through the quiet morning. Brenda stood on the sidewalk, dripping wet, shouting at Mike. "You idiot! You could have killed me. I am suing you and the city and everyone involved." A police officer tried to calm her down. "Madam, please step back. Are you injured?" "I am traumatized. I demand someone arrest this incompetent fool." Mike, now on dry land and wrapped in a blanket provided by a firefighter, looked confused. "I do not understand what happened." The sweeper just followed a detour sign. I tried to stop it, but the slope was too steep. The police examined the scene. An officer walked over to where I had placed the signs and cones. "Who put these here?" No one answered. The officer looked around at the growing crowd of residents. "These are not city authorized. Someone placed them illegally." My heart pounded, but I kept my expression neutral, standing among the other onlookers. I had worn gloves when handling the signs, so there would be no fingerprints. I had purchased the materials with cash from a hardware store 2 towns over. The fire department called in a tow truck equipped to handle the water extraction. It took 3 hours to pull the street sweeper out of the pond. The machine was totaled, its electrical systems fried. The city supervisor who arrived on scene estimated the damage at over $200,000. Brenda appointed herself as the primary witness and gave lengthy statements to multiple officers. "This is clearly sabotage. Someone in this neighborhood has been undermining my authority for months. I demand a full investigation." Detective Sarah Mendez, a sharp-eyed woman in her mid-30s, took over the case. She interviewed residents throughout the day. When she got to me, I was ready. "Mr. Fitzgerald, did you see or hear anything unusual this morning?" "Just the crash," I said honestly. "I came outside when I heard the splash." "What time did you wake up?" "Around 5:45. I am usually up early for work." "Did you notice anyone near the intersection earlier? Anyone who might have placed those traffic signs?" "No, sorry." I was inside getting ready until I heard the noise. She studied me for a moment. "I understand you have had some conflicts with Mrs. Patterson regarding HOA violations." "I would not call them conflicts. She is just enforcing the rules." I kept my tone mild. "She has fined you 15 times in 3 months. That seems excessive." I shrugged. "The HOA has strict standards. I am learning to adapt." Detective Mendez did not look convinced, but she had no evidence. She moved on to other interviews. What I had not anticipated was how the incident would galvanize the neighborhood against Brenda. That evening, I overheard conversations between residents who were openly celebrating the disruption. "Best thing that ever happened to this place," one man said. "Maybe Brenda will finally back off." "I heard the city is sending her a bill for the street sweeper," another woman added. $200,000. The next day, I received a notice that an emergency HOA meeting had been called for Friday evening. Attendance was mandatory for all homeowners. The agenda listed only one item: discussion of criminal vandalism and enhanced security measures. I knew Brenda would use this meeting to tighten her grip even further. I had to act fast. I spent the next 3 days reaching out to every homeowner in Meadowbrook Estates. sharing the financial documents I had uncovered. I created a simple spreadsheet showing how Brenda and her family members had diverted over $400,000 from HOA funds over the past 5 years through inflated contracts and kickback schemes. Some residents were shocked. Others had suspected, but lacked proof. Jennifer, the woman who had thanked me after the previous meeting, helped spread the information through a neighborhood Facebook group that Brenda did not monitor. By Friday, the mood in Meadowbrook Estates had shifted dramatically. Residents were angry, not about the street sweeper incident, but about the financial corruption. The meeting room was packed, standing room only. Brenda stood at the podium, flanked by her board members, looking more severe than ever. She had a new designer outfit and a fresh manicure, apparently unbothered by the near-death experience. "We are here tonight because someone in this community committed a serious crime," she began. "The police are investigating, and when they catch the perpetrator, I will personally ensure they face the maximum penalties. In the meantime, the board is implementing new security measures. We will install cameras at every intersection, monitoring all activity 24/7. The cost will be assessed equally among all homeowners, approximately $800 per household." The room erupted. Residents shouted over each other. $800? Are you insane? We cannot afford this. Who authorized this spending? Brenda banged a gavel. Order. The board has unilateral authority over security matters under Section 9 of the bylaws. I stood up, and the room quieted. Before we discuss security cameras, I think we should discuss where our money has been going. Brenda, can you explain why your brother-in-law's company was paid $48,000 for a fountain that typically costs $15,000? Or why your husband's landscaping company charges us triple the market rate? Or why you co-own the property management company that takes 20% of our HOA dues? Brenda's face went white. Those are baseless accusations. You have no proof. Actually, I do. I held up a folder thick with documents. I requested financial records as permitted under Arizona HOA law. Everything is right here. Canceled checks, invoices, business registration records. You have been embezzling from this neighborhood for years. The board members looked at each other nervously. Susan tried to speak. Frank, you are taking things out of context. Those contracts were competitively bid. Really, show me the other bids. I waited. Silence. That is what I thought. An older resident named Harold stood up. He was a retired accountant and well respected in the community. I would like to examine those documents. I handed him the folder. Harold put on his reading glasses and spent several minutes reviewing the paperwork. The room remained silent, everyone watching him. Finally, Harold looked up. This is fraud. Clear, unambiguous fraud. Brenda, you and your board members need to resign immediately, or I am calling the police right now. Brenda tried to maintain her composure. You cannot force us to resign. We were elected according to the bylaws. We can hold a vote of no confidence, Jennifer said, standing up. Section 23 allows for removal of board members with a 2/3 vote of homeowners present at any meeting. I second that motion, George called out. All in favor? Harold asked. Nearly every hand in the room went up. The vote was not even close. Brenda looked around, her face cycling through shock, anger, and finally resignation. Fine. You people have no idea what you are doing. This neighborhood will fall apart without proper leadership. I think we will manage, I said. The board members gathered their belongings and left quickly, avoiding eye contact with everyone. After they were gone, the energy in the room transformed. People were smiling, some even hugging. Harold took charge temporarily. We need to form an interim board and conduct a full audit of HOA finances. I volunteer to lead the audit committee. I will help, said a woman named Rachel, who was a paralegal. Over the next hour, we elected a new temporary board composed of reasonable people who actually wanted to serve the community rather than exploit it. We voted to immediately suspend all outstanding fines pending review. We voted to terminate the inflated contracts and hire new vendors at fair market rates. We voted to roll back the ridiculous bylaws that Brenda had implemented. As I walked home that night, I felt lighter than I had in months. The neighborhood felt different too, like a weight had been lifted. But the story was not over yet. The following Monday, Detective Mendez showed up at my door again. My stomach dropped. "Mr. Fitzgerald, may I come in? Am I under arrest? Should you be?" She studied my reaction carefully. "No, I have not done anything wrong." "Then you will not mind answering a few more questions." I let her in, trying to keep my breathing steady. We sat in my living room. "I have been reviewing security footage from businesses near the hardware store in Casa Grande," she said. "Someone matching your description purchased traffic cones and reflective tape 3 weeks ago. Paid cash." My mouth went dry. "Lots of people look like me." "The footage also shows the person loading these items into a white Ford truck. You drive a white Ford truck." I said nothing, which was my right. Here is the thing, Frank. I understand why someone would want to take action against Brenda Patterson. After this week's revelations, I would say she got off easy with just a street sweeper in a pond. She leaned forward. But property destruction is still a crime. The city is out $200,000. Are you charging me? I am debating it. On one hand, I have circumstantial evidence linking you to the equipment purchases. On the other hand, I have no witnesses, no forensics, and no direct proof you placed those signs. A decent lawyer would get the case thrown out in 10 minutes. Then why are you here? Because I want to know the truth. Off the record. I considered my options. Detective Mendez seemed reasonable, but admitting guilt would be incredibly stupid. Off the record. I think whoever redirected that street sweeper probably saved this neighborhood from years of continued financial abuse. Brenda would have bankrupted half these families with her fines and corrupt contracts. Sometimes the system does not work, and people have to take matters into their own hands. She nodded slowly. That is an interesting philosophical perspective. Purely hypothetical, of course. Of course. She stood up to leave. Just so you know, Brenda filed a civil lawsuit against the city for emotional distress. She is claiming negligence for not securing their street sweeper against unauthorized detours. Will that go anywhere? Probably not. The city's lawyers are already arguing that she contributed to her own distress by walking with earbuds in and not paying attention to her surroundings. Detective Mendez paused at the door. "Oh, and the district attorney received an interesting package this morning. Detailed financial records showing embezzlement from the Meadowbrook Estates, HOA. Someone sent them anonymously. I tried not to show any reaction. I had mailed that package the day after the emergency meeting, using gloves and a post office in Phoenix. The DA is opening a criminal investigation," she continued. "Brenda and her board members are looking at serious charges: fraud, embezzlement, possibly racketeering if they can prove a pattern of organized criminal activity." "Good," I said. "They deserve it. They do." She looked me in the eye. "Whoever sent that package did the right thing. The legal way. That is how justice is supposed to work." I agree completely. After she left, I sat down heavily on my couch. That had been too close. I had gotten lucky that the detective was reasonable, and that the DA was now focused on bigger crimes than traffic sign placement. Over the next month, the neighborhood transformation continued. The new board conducted the audit and discovered even more financial irregularities. Brenda had been stealing for longer and taking more than anyone realized. The total was estimated at nearly $700,000. The district attorney moved quickly. In early December, Brenda, Susan, Margaret, and Patricia were all arrested and charged with multiple felonies. The local news covered the story extensively, portraying Meadowbrook Estates as a cautionary tale about unchecked HOA power. Brenda's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the DA refused. This case was too high profile, and the evidence was overwhelming. The trial was set for the following spring. Meanwhile, our neighborhood began to heal. The new board refunded all of the unjust fines Brenda had collected. George got back $3,000. I received $7,500, which covered all 15 of my ridiculous violations. Other families received refunds too, some in the tens of thousands. We renegotiated contracts with vendors and cut our monthly HOA dues by 40%. The fountain renovation was canceled, and instead we fixed the street lights, repaired the playground, and repainted the community clubhouse. The bylaws were completely rewritten. The new version was only 12 pages long and focused on genuine safety and property maintenance issues rather than petty aesthetic rules. We established an appeals process for violations and capped fines at reasonable amounts. Christmas in Meadowbrook Estates felt different that year. People actually decorated their homes without fear. Children rode bikes on lawns. Someone put up an inflatable snowman that would have earned a $1,000 fine under Brenda's regime. Now, it just made people smile. I was outside hanging lights when Jennifer walked over with a plate of cookies. "These are for you," she said. "Thank you for everything you did." "I just shared some public records," I said carefully. "Right. And I am sure you had nothing to do with the street sweeper incident either." I did not confirm or deny anything, just took a cookie. It was excellent, some kind of chocolate peppermint combination. "The neighborhood is taking a vote next month," Jennifer continued. "We want to elect you to the board. You would be great at it." I shook my head. "I appreciate that, but I am not really a leadership person. I just wanted to fix a problem." "You did more than that. You gave people hope that they could stand up to bullies. Anyone would have done the same. But they did not. You did." After she left, I thought about what she had said. I had not set out to be a hero or make a statement. I had just been angry and pushed too far. The street sweeper plan had been reckless and could have gone wrong in many ways. Mike could have been seriously hurt. The environmental damage to the pond took weeks to remediate. But at the same time, nothing else had worked. Brenda had the system rigged. She controlled the board, wrote the rules to benefit herself, and silenced opposition through fear and intimidation. Traditional channels for reform had been blocked. Did that justify what I did? I still was not sure. But I did know that sometimes change requires someone willing to take risks and face consequences. The trial began in March. I attended several days of testimony, sitting in the back of the courtroom. Brenda looked smaller somehow, less intimidating in her orange jail jumpsuit. She had been denied bail after prosecutors argued she was a flight risk with significant financial resources. The evidence was damning. Forensic accountants traced the money flows showing systematic theft over 5 years. Former vendors testified about being pressured to inflate invoices and kick back portions to Brenda. Homeowners testified about the climate of fear she had created. Brenda's defense was that she had been trying to maintain high standards and that her compensation was justified for the work she did managing the HOA. The jury did not buy it. After 2 weeks of testimony, they deliberated for only 4 hours. Guilty on all counts, fraud, embezzlement, racketeering, and abuse of office. The judge scheduled sentencing for 6 weeks later. In the meantime, Brenda remained in custody. I ran into Detective Mendez outside the courtroom. "Justice served," she said. "Seems like it. You know, I never did figure out who placed those traffic signs. The hardware store footage was too grainy for a positive ID." "That is unfortunate." "Is it?" She gave me a knowing look. "Sometimes the universe has a way of balancing things out. Not everything needs to be solved." "I appreciate that perspective. Just do me a favor, Frank. If you ever feel like redirecting any more city vehicles, maybe call me first. We can probably find a legal solution." "I think my vigilante days are behind me." "Good. You are a terrible criminal anyway. Way too honest." The sentencing hearing was packed. The judge, a stern woman named Patricia O'Connor, reviewed the case thoroughly before pronouncing sentence. "Mrs. Patterson, you held a position of trust in your community. Homeowners relied on you to manage their funds responsibly and govern fairly. Instead, you systematically stole from them, enriched your family members, and created an atmosphere of fear and intimidation. Your crimes were calculated and sustained over many years. This court finds that you showed no remorse and continued to deny responsibility even in the face of overwhelming evidence." Brenda stood emotionless, her lawyer's hand on her shoulder. "I hereby sentence you to 12 years in state prison on the embezzlement charges, to run consecutively with 8 years for fraud and 6 years for racketeering. Total sentence, 26 years. You are also ordered to pay full restitution of $712,000 to the Meadowbrook Estates, HOA, plus court costs and penalties." The courtroom murmured. 26 years was more than most people expected. Brenda would be in her 70s before she was eligible for parole. Her board members received lighter sentences due to their cooperation. Susan got 5 years, Margaret got 4, and Patricia got 3. All were also ordered to pay restitution based on their share of the stolen money. As I left the courthouse, I felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Brenda had brought this on herself, but 26 years was a harsh reality. Her life was essentially over. George caught up with me in the parking lot. "Frank, I wanted to thank you properly. My wife and we were going to lose our house because of those fines. The refund saved us." "I am glad it worked out. You know, there is a rumor going around about the street sweeper thing." I tensed. "What kind of rumor?" "People say it was karma, that the universe got tired of Brenda's nonsense and intervened." He grinned. "I like that explanation. Keeps things simple." "Karma is powerful," I agreed. Life in Meadowbrook Estates continued improving. The new board was functional and reasonable. Fines were rare and proportional. People actually wanted to serve on committees because it was about genuine community improvement rather than power games. I did eventually join the Architectural Review Committee, helping evaluate requests for home modifications. It was boring work, but satisfying in its own way. We approved 90% of requests, denying only those that posed genuine safety issues or dramatically departed from the neighborhood aesthetic. The retention pond was fully restored by summer. The city had hired environmental consultants to ensure no lasting damage from the street sweeper's fuel and hydraulic fluids. They installed better barriers and warning signs to prevent future accidents. Mike, the street sweeper driver, had been cleared of any wrongdoing. The city acknowledged that the unauthorized detour signs had caused the incident, and that he had done his best to prevent it. He kept his job and actually got a commendation for his quick thinking in evacuating the sinking vehicle without injury. The city never sent a bill to anyone for the destroyed sweeper. Their insurance covered it, and they chose not to pursue the matter further. I suspected Detective Mendez had something to do with that decision, though I never asked. A year after the incident, I was working in my garage when a car pulled up. Detective Mendez got out, now dressed in casual clothes rather than her usual detective attire. "Frank Fitzgerald, that is me. Are you here in an official capacity?" "Nope, I am off duty." "Actually, I am not a detective anymore. I took a position with the State Attorney General's office investigating HOA fraud across Arizona." "Congratulations. That seems like important work." "It is. We have found that Meadowbrook Estates was not unique. There are corrupt boards all over the state doing similar things, just maybe not as blatantly. Your case helped shine a light on the problem. Glad something good came from it." She handed me a folder. "I thought you might want to see this." We found it while doing follow-up on Brenda's financial records. Inside was a document showing that Brenda had taken out a $1 million insurance policy on herself, covering legal fees and liabilities. She had been preparing for the possibility of getting caught, which suggested she knew her actions were criminal all along. "The insurance company is refusing to pay out since she was convicted of intentional crimes," Detective Mendez explained. "So she is truly bankrupted. No assets left after restitution orders. Her husband divorced her. Her family members who benefited from the scheme are also broke and facing their own civil suits." "Complete downfall," I observed. "Absolute. And here is the interesting part." She pulled out another document. Someone anonymously donated $50,000 to a legal aid fund that helps homeowners fight abusive HOAs. The donation came through a complicated series of transfers, but it originated from an account in Casa Grande, opened the same week. Someone bought traffic cones there. My heart rate increased. That is quite a coincidence, isn't it? Almost like someone who maybe made a mistake wanted to balance things out by helping people the legal way. She looked at me directly. "I did not trace it further. No crime in anonymous donations. I just wanted you to know that money is helping people. Real people who could not afford lawyers to fight back against boards like Brenda's. Whoever made that donation sounds like a decent person. They do." She started to leave, then turned back. "You know, Frank, I have been thinking about that whole street sweeper thing, about whether it was right or wrong." "And what did you conclude?" "That sometimes the law is not fast enough or strong enough to stop real harm. Brenda could have bankrupted dozens of families before the legal system caught up with her. Someone got impatient and forced the issue. Was it illegal? Probably. Was it wrong? I honestly do not know anymore. That is a complicated ethical question." "It is. But here is what I do know. After that incident, people started paying attention. The media covered it. Other neighborhoods started questioning their own boards. The state legislature is now considering new oversight laws for HOAs. Ripple effects from one street sweeper in one pond." "Butterfly effect," I said. "Exactly. Sometimes small actions have big consequences for better or worse." She extended her hand. "Take care of yourself, Frank, and maybe stick to legal activism from now on." "That is the plan." After she drove away, I sat in my garage thinking about the past year. The street sweeper incident had been reckless and stupid, but it had worked. It had broken Brenda's grip on the neighborhood and exposed her crimes. Was I proud of it? Not exactly, but I was not ashamed either. The truth was, I had been lucky. Lucky that no one was seriously hurt. Lucky that the detective investigating was reasonable. Lucky that the security footage was not clear enough for prosecution. Lucky that bigger crimes had overshadowed my property destruction. Would I do it again? No. I had learned that there were better ways to fight injustice, slower but more sustainable. The anonymous donation to the legal aid fund felt better than the street sweeper ever had. Helping people defend themselves through proper channels created lasting change without the risk and moral ambiguity. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. "Board meeting tonight. We are voting on the annual budget. Your input would be valuable." I texted back that I would be there. This was what community involvement should look like. Boring meetings about budgets and maintenance schedules, not dramatic confrontations and criminal schemes. That evening, about 15 residents gathered in the clubhouse. We reviewed expenses, discussed upcoming projects, and voted on proposals. It was tedious and unglamorous, exactly as it should be. During the open comment period, Harold stood up. "I want to take a moment to recognize how far we have come. A year ago, this neighborhood was controlled by fear. Now we are a real community again. People talk to each other. Kids play together. We help each other out. That is what an HOA should be about." Everyone applauded. George added, "We also need to remember to stay vigilant, not paranoid like Brenda, but aware. Power corrupts, and we need to make sure our board stays accountable." "Agreed," the board president said. She was a retired teacher named Linda who had volunteered for the position reluctantly but performed it excellently. "That is why we post all financial records online every month and encourage everyone to review them. Transparency prevents corruption." After the meeting, I walked home under a clear Arizona sky. The neighborhood was quiet, peaceful. Porch lights glowed warmly. Someone was barbecuing, the smell of grilled meat drifting on the breeze. This was what I had wanted when I moved to Meadowbrook Estates. A normal, pleasant place to live. It had taken a bizarre journey to get here, including faking traffic signs and potentially committing felony property destruction, but we had arrived. My doorbell rang the next morning. I opened it to find a delivery person holding a large envelope. "Signature required." I signed and took the envelope inside. It was from a law firm in Phoenix. My stomach clenched, fearing some kind of legal action related to the street sweeper. Instead, it was a letter informing me that the Meadowbrook Estates HOA had filed a civil lawsuit against Brenda Patterson, her board members, and their family members who had benefited from the fraud. The suit sought full recovery of stolen funds plus damages. As a homeowner, I was listed as one of the plaintiffs in the class action. The letter explained that the law firm was working on contingency, meaning we paid nothing unless they won. Given the criminal convictions, they expected a favorable outcome. I set the letter aside, feeling a sense of closure. The legal system was working, slowly but surely. Justice was being served through proper channels, but I would be lying if I said I regretted the street sweeper. That moment of chaos had been the catalyst for everything that followed. Sometimes you need to break something to fix it, even if it is not the recommended approach. My neighbor George walked by with his dog and waved. His mailbox, once 3 inches too tall and subject to fines, now stood proudly at whatever height George wanted. His lawn had a few weeds, and no one cared. His house was painted a color Brenda would have forbidden, and it looked great. Freedom looked like George walking his dog without fear of citations and fines. It looked like kids leaving toys on lawns. It looked like people planting gardens without consulting 30 pages of bylaws. Several months later, the civil lawsuit settled. Brenda's insurance refused to cover intentional criminal acts, so her personal assets were liquidated. Her house was sold. Her cars were sold. Her jewelry, furniture, everything went to satisfy the judgment. She was left with nothing. The HOA recovered about 60% of the stolen money, which was better than expected. The law firm took their contingency fee, and the remaining funds were distributed to homeowners, based on how much they had been overcharged or unjustly fined. I received another check for $4,000, representing my share of the recovered funds. I donated half to the legal aid fund and used the rest to upgrade my garage workspace. Life continued its steady rhythm. I got a promotion at work. I started dating a woman named Sophie who lived 2 neighborhoods over. The seasons changed, bringing another autumn. This time when the leaves fell, I raked them into a pile and called the city for pickup. No one measured the pile. No one photographed it. No one fined me. It was gloriously boring. I ran into Mike, the street sweeper driver, at a coffee shop. He recognized me from the neighborhood. "Hey, you are from Meadowbrook Estates, right?" "That is right, Frank Fitzgerald." "Mike Rodriguez. I drive the street sweeper." "Well, I used to drive the one that ended up in your pond," he laughed. "Craziest day of my career, I bet. I heard you handled it well." "Thanks." Honestly, it was terrifying. One second I am following my route, next second I am sinking into a pond. He took a sip of his coffee. "But you know what? Best thing that ever happened to me. The incident got the city to upgrade all their equipment, new sweepers with better safety systems. They gave me a raise, and that whole HOA scandal that came out of it, that was wild, definitely wild. Someone told me the HOA president got like 26 years in prison. Is that true? It is. Damn, I almost feel bad for her. Do not. She earned every year of that sentence." He nodded. "Yeah, I read about what she did. Stealing from her neighbors like that, that is low." He stood to leave. "Anyway, good seeing you. And hey, if you ever see any weird traffic signs near that pond again, give me a call before I drive into it." I laughed. "Will do." As he left, I reflected on how many lives had been affected by that one morning. Mike got better equipment and a raise. Dozens of families got refunds and financial relief. A corrupt board was dismantled. New legislation was being considered. Legal aid funds were helping other neighborhoods. All because I got mad about a leaf pile and made a very questionable decision. The moral of the story: I'm not sure there is one. Maybe it is that systems need accountability, and when institutions fail, individuals sometimes have to act. Or maybe it is that crime does not pay, as Brenda discovered. Or maybe it is just that HOAs need better oversight and regulations to prevent abuse in the first place. What I learned personally was that I am not cut out for vigilante justice. The stress of potentially getting caught, the moral ambiguity, the risk of unintended consequences, it was too much. I would never do anything like that again. But I would also never let another Brenda Patterson run roughshod over people without resistance. There were legal ways to fight back, and I had learned them. I had become knowledgeable about HOA law, homeowner rights, and community organizing. Those tools were just as powerful as fake traffic signs and street sweepers, just slower. Sophie asked me once why I had become so involved in HOA governance. Most people could not care less about board meetings and bylaws, but you are there every month, reading every document. I guess I learned that ignoring small injustices leads to big problems, I told her. If everyone pays attention and holds their leaders accountable, corruption cannot take root. That is very civic-minded of you, or maybe I am just paranoid after dealing with Brenda. She laughed. Little bit of both, probably. A year later, I finally felt comfortable talking about the street sweeper incident, at least in hypothetical terms. George and I were having beers on his patio when he brought it up. "You know, I always wondered who set up that detour that put the street sweeper in the pond." "It is a mystery," I said carefully. "The timing was awfully convenient, right when Brenda was at peak tyranny, right before that emergency meeting. Coincidences happen. They do." He took a long drink. "But if I ever met the person who did it, I would want to thank them." That incident was the wake-up call this neighborhood needed. Without it, Brenda would still be in power, stealing our money and making our lives miserable. You would thank someone for committing property destruction and potentially endangering lives. I would thank them for having the guts to do what needed to be done when no one else would. We sat in silence for a moment, watching the sun set over the retention pond. It looked beautiful in the orange light, completely recovered from its brief stint as a parking spot for city equipment. Hypothetically, I said slowly, if someone had done something like that, they probably did not think it through very well. They probably got lucky that no one was hurt and that they did not get caught. Hypothetically, that person should probably not push their luck again. Agreed. Hypothetically, George raised his beer bottle. To hypothetical heroes and the neighborhoods they save. I clinked my bottle against his. To boring HOA meetings and reasonable bylaws. I will drink to that. The street sweeper incident became neighborhood legend over time. New residents heard various versions of the story, each more embellished than the last. Some versions had multiple vehicles in the pond. Some had Brenda falling in herself. Some claimed the driver did it intentionally as revenge for a parking ticket. I never corrected any of the stories. Let people believe what they wanted. The truth was strange enough. 3 years after that fateful November morning, I was elected to the HOA board. I had resisted for a long time, but Linda was stepping down and the neighborhood needed experienced people who understood how things could go wrong. My first act as a board member was to propose a limit on consecutive terms. No one could serve more than 4 years without taking at least a 2-year break. Power needed to circulate, not concentrate. The proposal passed unanimously. My second act was to establish an independent audit requirement. Every 2 years, an outside firm would review HOA finances and operations, reporting directly to the homeowners rather than the board. That also passed unanimously. We were building safeguards to prevent another Brenda Patterson. Not just rules, but cultural norms about transparency, accountability, and community service over personal gain. It was boring work. Unglamorous. No dramatic confrontations or street sweepers in ponds. Just steady, incremental improvements to make sure the system worked for everyone. And that was exactly how it should be. On the 4th anniversary of the street sweeper incident, someone placed a small plaque near the retention pond. It read, "In memory of Street Sweeper Unit 7, who gave its life on November 3, 2021, to expose corruption and restore justice to Meadowbrook Estates. May we never forget the cost of unchecked power." The board voted to let the plaque stay. It became a quirky neighborhood landmark, something people pointed out to visitors with a knowing smile. I visited the plaque sometimes, usually alone in the early morning. It reminded me of a chapter in my life that was simultaneously my proudest and most reckless moment. I had acted out of anger and frustration, not wisdom or careful planning. I had gotten lucky, but I had also learned from it. I had grown from a passive resident into an active community member. I had discovered that change was possible when people stood together. I had learned the power of transparency and accountability. Detective Mendez, now a senior investigator with the Attorney General, came back to Meadowbrook Estates occasionally to use our story in her training programs for other HOA fraud investigations. She never named me, never even looked my way during presentations, but I always felt a knowing connection. After one presentation, we finally spoke directly about it. "You know, I never officially solved the street sweeper case," she said, I remember. "It still bothers me sometimes." Unsolved cases do that. Maybe some mysteries are better left unsolved. Maybe, she paused, or maybe I solved it and chose not to prosecute because bigger justice was being served. That would be a very pragmatic approach. I am a pragmatic person, she smiled. Anyway, I just wanted you to know that whatever happened that morning, it led to good outcomes, not just here but across the state. We have recovered millions of dollars from corrupt HOA boards. We have reformed laws. We have protected thousands of homeowners. That is good work. It is. And it started with one street sweeper in one pond in one neighborhood where someone decided enough was enough. After she left, I stood by the retention pond for a long time, thinking about justice and methods and consequences. The water was clear and calm, filled with fish and frequented by herons. You would never know a vehicle had been submerged there. That was the thing about disruptive moments. They passed. The water settled. Life continued. But the ripples spread outward, touching shores you never imagined. I thought about Brenda sometimes, wondering how she was handling prison, whether she felt remorse or still blamed everyone else for her downfall, whether she understood that her greed and tyranny had destroyed her own life more thoroughly than any street sweeper ever could. Mostly, though, I just felt grateful. Grateful to live in a neighborhood where people cared about each other. Grateful for the boring normalcy of functional governance. Grateful that I had learned lessons without facing criminal charges. And grateful, in a strange way, for that pile of autumn leaves that had pushed me past my breaking point into action. Sometimes it took something small and absurd to catalyze real change. Sophie and I got married that spring in the community clubhouse. Half the neighborhood attended. George was my best man. Linda officiated, having gotten ordained online specifically for the occasion. We danced under the same roof where Brenda had once ruled with an iron fist, and the contrast was not lost on anyone. During the reception, Harold gave a toast to Frank, who taught us that standing up to bullies requires courage, creativity, and occasionally questionable judgment. Everyone laughed and raised their glasses. But seriously, Harold continued, Frank showed us that communities are worth fighting for. That good people can make a difference when they refuse to accept injustice. We are better neighbors because of his example. I felt embarrassed by the attention, but also proud. Not proud of redirecting a street sweeper, but proud of building something better from the chaos. Proud of helping create a neighborhood where people felt safe and respected. That was the real victory. Not Brenda's conviction or the recovered money, but the simple fact that people could now live their lives without fear of arbitrary fines and tyrannical enforcement. As I looked around the clubhouse at my neighbors, friends, and new wife, I realized that this was what I had fought for. Not revenge or justice in the abstract, but the concrete reality of people being able to relax in their own homes and enjoy their community. The street sweeper had been a means to an end, not the end itself. A catalyst, not a solution. The real work had been everything that came after. The organizing, the transparency, the democratic reforms, the patient building of better systems. That work continued. It would always continue, because freedom and fairness required constant maintenance. Vigilance, as George had said, without paranoia. Years passed. I served my term on the board and stepped down, making way for younger residents with fresh perspectives. Sophie and I had kids who grew up playing in yards and parks without anyone measuring their toys or timing their activities. The neighborhood thrived. Property values increased not because of draconian enforcement, but because people wanted to live in a place where neighbors were friends rather than adversaries. We had block parties and holiday celebrations. We helped each other during hard times. Brenda became a distant memory, a cautionary tale told to new residents. You should have seen it before, old-timers would say. There was this HOA president who was completely crazy. And occasionally, Someone would point to the plaque by the retention pond and share the legend of the street sweeper, now thoroughly mythologized into a story of cosmic justice and mechanical martyrdom. I never confirmed or denied my role. It was better as a mystery, a neighborhood legend that belonged to everyone rather than one person's confession. But sometimes, on quiet mornings when I walked past the pond, I whispered a quiet thanks to Street Sweeper Unit 7 for its unintended sacrifice. And I promised to keep doing the boring, important work of maintaining the community it had accidentally helped save. That was my story. The story of how HOA fined me for an autumn leaf pile, and how a street sweeper ended up in a retention pond, and how corruption was exposed and justice was served, and how a neighborhood learned to govern itself with wisdom instead of tyranny. It was not a story I was completely proud of. It was not a story I would recommend others emulate. But it was my story, and ultimately, it had a happy ending, though not the one I had imagined when I angrily planned my revenge against Brenda Patterson. The best endings never are.